what we learn in a patient interaction is only a small fraction of what makes up that individual. So the ability to capture the 360 profile and to put all of those data elements together, I think creates a unique place setting for discovery.
No, absolutely. Now, if Decode Health succeeds at full scale, what's the biggest thing it could change in the next 5 to 10 years in healthcare, diagnostics, or drug discovery?
I think that one of the aspects that I'm most excited about is creating true digital twins
Oh,
for disease. And we just announced a major initiative supported by the NIH in multiple sclerosis. And
yes.
we have some of the largest data assets in multiple sclerosis that allow us to not only think about the origins of disease, but how
Yes.
to intercept disease signals faster and then link those patients to treatments.
This is the Helix Exchange, the first podcast about the business of genomics.
Welcome to the Helix Exchange, the first podcast about the business of genomics and how it's reshaping our world in ways you might never imagine. Each episode features a voice pushing the boundaries of science and business, sharing their insights to help you, our audience, see what's next and how to engage with the opportunities ahead. Today, we're joined by Dr. Chase Spurlock, CEO and co founder of Decode Health. Chase's work sits at the intersection of AI, genomics, and healthcare, helping predict disease risk and inform better clinical and commercial decisions. He's built a company that bridges science, technology, and business, and we're thrilled to have him on the Helix Exchange. Hello, Dr. Spurlock, or do you prefer Chase?
Great to be with you. Chase is fine.
All right, Chase, let's start with your own DNA. What sparked your path into this field? And then we're going to jump into talking about Decode Health and all of the incredible work that you're doing.
Well, looking back, I've been very fortunate to have a number of mentors and to also have a great deal of clinical experience. So, as a researcher, I trained as an immunologist. I've also had a great deal of clinical exposure. And I would say that my interest in genomics and interest in a lot of the questions that we're trying to solve for today started working with doctors and being able to witness the doctor patient interaction and sitting at the intersection of the frontier of science and genomics and laboratory studies, and then to be able to go into the clinic and see how care was being delivered. It was an interesting glimpse into two different worlds. And I would say that those worlds are starting to collide more today. But when I first got into this, you were either on the clinical side or the research side, and it was kind of rare, I would say, to see people that could really straddle both worlds effectively. You had certain physician scientists that obviously had a unique perspective, but for a PhD trained immunologist to get that clinical exposure, it was unique. So I saw a lot of patients struggling to get a diagnosis. Um, in the field of immunology, the big bad wolf is autoimmune disease,
Yes.
conditions like multiple sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease, rheumatoid arthritis. It can take many years to reach a diagnosis.
Yes.
And I felt like the clinical criteria, the laboratory studies that were being run were decades old in some cases. And we had cutting edge science in the lab. So, how could we translate the data that we have in the lab to a clinical tool to influence care? And that always stuck with me. And it was
Yeah.
a key theme for our research team at the time. And I would say that that dilemma that I observed has launched me into my career and now two different startup ventures.
That's so exciting. My mother struggled with autoimmune disease, unknown origin, 70s, 80s, and it was just heartbreaking. And she just couldn't get an answer, and it was very confusing. And I just have such a deep appreciation for what you're doing, and it's going to make such a difference for so many. That must feel incredible.
It's great, and it's unique for a person to be able to take an R&D concept and actually
Right.
see it touch a patient's life. And that first company, taught me a lot about genomics, which I know is the topic today,
Right.
and how you really need to break down that barrier between the research team and the technical team and the clinical team.
Yes, it's so important. Now, you mentioned obviously about your molecular immunology. How did that background influence your approach to entrepreneurship?
So I would say that I've now been fortunate to be a part of the Nashville healthcare and new venture community for
Oh,
about the past 10, 15 years. I never knew at the time how central data, let alone AI, would be in my life moving
right.
forward. We were among the first to
Oh,
use machine learning to interrogate large RNA data sets in autoimmune disease.
mm.
And at the time when I was in training, if it couldn't be done in Excel, we really didn't want to talk about it. And I could walk up and down the hallways, and I, I was generating tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of data points per patient in the lab.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'll never forget a person down the hallway saying, "You're going to produce all this data, and you're not going to be able to make any sense of it."
Oh, my.
And I took that almost as a challenge to say,
Ah,
I'm gonna figure this out. And what
right.
I found is a great friend in the Department of Mathematics who had been applying these advanced data techniques to other types of problems. And what we found was a lot of what I was trying to solve followed a similar pattern to some of the um, uh, other applications that he was exploring. And it was through the combination of mathematics and physics that I was able to get exposure to tools that are now foundational to everything that we're doing today and also are taught about in the popular culture.
Well, that's exciting. Now, Chase, what are you and your team at Decode Health working on right now that's making genomics more actionable? And what problem does it solve or decision does it inform?
So I currently lead Decode Health. We deliver an advanced data platform to accelerate the R&D pipelines of big
Mm.
companies, pharma, diagnostic, med device companies. We even support and do strategic collaborations with other health tech companies. The platform is used in two big ways for biomarker discovery. So that could be finding new biomarkers that we can test to see how a patient's doing, biomarkers that we can target for therapeutics, or on advanced clinical decision support. So this is finding patients, risk stratifying patients, explaining outcomes so that we can intercept and provide better care. So the prediction of outcomes. Um, it, as I'm explaining it to different groups, it's all about disease detection, disease monitoring, treatment, and prediction of outcomes. And our team gets a front row seat on a lot of really cool studies. We are helping to refine existing products or conceptualize entirely new products and services. So that same discovery element that was part of
Mhm.
my research experience is able to continue today, and that's it's a tremendous gift. And I would say that commercially, a lot of our work is aligned around shared incentives, so
Mm.
shared upside, licensing opportunities, and that makes it a true collaboration from day one, where you're all pointing in the same direction.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, you've clearly got a clear sense of where things are today. And before we move on, let's also go back for a moment to the point that made this conversation possible, which was back in 2003. The Human Genome Project and ENCODE gave us a map or blueprint of genomics. But the real question is how we've used it. So, from a business and translational perspective, how far do you think we've come in turning those discoveries into real world impact?
I think that it's a very interesting time in genomics because we now have a lot of cloud compute and storage capabilities that allow us to efficiently ask questions of
Mm,
large data assets. So the earliest sequencing, which led to the first blueprint of the human genome, and then the follow-on projects, those took many years because of just the size of the data sets that we were trying to probe. And what would be kind of cool is if we could go back in time and take our cloud computing capabilities and deploy it in those very early innings of the genomics baseball game here. And I would say that you can't build a house without a foundation. And the Human Genome Project and the follow-on Encode project and everything that's come out of it is allowing us to build the house of precision medicine. And I think that a lot of people think that the Human Genome Project has stopped. What I would say is that the Human Genome Project lives on in the research labs across the country, even in our own company, because we're continuing to find things that allow us to better understand the genetic and genomic makeup of a human being, and also find similarities not only across humans but other animal models that allow us to answer questions and advance science.
Right. Now, in addition to Decode, do you see certain companies, business models, or sectors that have figured out how to move genomic insight into the marketplace most effectively?
I would say that the most successful companies are those that are sitting at the intersection of multi-omics, so
Okay.
DNA, RNA, protein data, as well as clinical data. And then not just stopping there with an EHR extract or administrative claims, but also bringing in socioeconomic data, behavioral data, um, things that allow us to capture the full picture of a patient. And I think there's a growing appreciation for what we learn in a patient interaction is only a small fraction of what makes up that individual. So the ability to capture the 360 profile and to put all of those data elements together, I think creates a unique place setting for discovery.
No, absolutely. Now, if Decode Health succeeds at full scale, what's the biggest thing it could change in the next 5 to 10 years in healthcare, diagnostics, or drug discovery?
I think that one of the aspects that I'm most excited about is creating true digital twins
Oh,
for disease. And we just announced a major initiative supported by the NIH in multiple sclerosis. And
yes.
we have some of the largest data assets in multiple sclerosis that allow us to not only think about the origins of disease, but how to intercept disease signals faster and then link those patients to treatments. So the digital twin and true goal of prevention of disease relapse is within our reach. And so I would love to see our company be able to make healthcare more proactive and less reactive, and being able to, from the patient's perspective, intercept those events that can take them out of work and take them out of interactions with their loved ones, the indirect cost of a lot of the conditions that we have touched, whether it's a chronic disease like multiple sclerosis or an acute condition like sepsis.
Right.
It all comes down to interception of that patient before bad things happen. And I think that we have unique skills, unique data, unique just drive to want to solve some of those problems.
Well, the reason I said yes when you mentioned about the multiple sclerosis is I read that on your blog. And one of my earliest forays into healthcare, I have a master in public health. I've been in the health world for 27 years, was working with people in adaptive physical education. And that's where I met several people with multiple sclerosis, and I became very close with them. And I saw the struggles they went through. And I don't know how far we've come. This was in the like early 90s. But it seems like we've come a bit, but there just seems like there's so much more. So I just want to say how happy I am about this.
Well, I will say that the field has advanced considerably over the last
Oh,
20
good.
years. And Outside of Decode, I'm involved with a nonprofit, the Accelerated Cure Project for Multiple Sclerosis. I'm on their
Oh,
scientific
wonderful.
steering committee.
Hmm.
And we had a meeting yesterday, actually, and I was just thinking about how optimistic I am about the field and how
Oh,
people who receive a diagnosis have a fighting chance to live a normal life. And I've also got friends, very close friends, whose parents have MS, and just this week they're experiencing complications, but they were diagnosed at a time when it probably took them a while to reach that finish line to say this is what you have. But then the
right.
tools that we had to treat them weren't nearly as effective as what we have today.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up because I've heard even recently that sometimes it can take a long time to get the right diagnosis when you have MS.
Oh, 5 to 7 years. And
Wow, that is a long time.
a friend of mine living in New York, he was a big runner, and one day he realized that a segment that he had run many, many times was almost impossible for him to accomplish.
Mm.
And he attributed it to just maybe getting a little bit older. But what he
Right,
found was that it was actually something much more, and he ultimately was diagnosed with MS. So that
mm,
fatigue, that,
right.
and he was also having some muscle spasms and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But it's those early signs that can often be pushed aside or go unnoticed, and then you end up in a case, particularly with relapsing remitting MS, where you
Yes,
have
yes.
a disease event, and that gets you into the clinic.
So let's talk about genomics and AI, especially in relation to the multiple sclerosis and helping to diagnose it earlier, to treat it. Is that something that you see happening?
I think so. And I think that physicians who are being trained today are being trained to embrace new technology at a pace that we haven't seen. I think that different disciplines are starting to recognize that the AI era is here. And it might be that they are simply inputting symptoms and laboratory results and then asking the computer for a differential diagnosis. And God willing, conditions like MS or inflammatory bowel disease are surfacing if the symptoms and lab results warrant it. But then I think it's going to start linking to new tests or follow ups that can take place, and also helping if a genomic test or any sort of laboratory test is offered, helping link that clinician to how to interpret and take the next steps based on that test, which I think has been a chasm in the field. How what how do you not only order a test, do you know it exists, but then how do you interpret it? And I
Right.
think that that interpretation layer is something that AI can really facilitate.
Well, for you, what's the most important thing you've learned about translating AI driven diagnostics and decision support tools from concept to clinical practice, especially when it comes to gaining trust from physicians, regulators, and payers?
I would say that my entrepreneurial experience has taught me that the best teams bring together diverse skill sets, clinical,
Hmm.
technical, commercial,
Right.
regulatory, to achieve translation. Collaboration's key from day one. And actually, outside of Decode, I'm honored, not only to continue serving on the faculty at Vanderbilt, Belmont, and NYU, but I'm also a part of a community initiative sponsored by the Nashville Chamber of Commerce. It's the Global Health Innovators.
Oh, cool.
And it's here that we've seen time and again the importance of setting up random collisions of stakeholders, those moments where you have conversations that lead to new ideas. In global health ecosystems, some of the most innovative that we've seen, we actually just got back from the UK. The most successful ones, they set up environments where people can easily meet and collaborate across disciplines. It combines policy, stakeholders with researchers, with clinicians, people on the front lines, and also people in the laboratory or in government to say, here's the plan, here's how we define success, and here is how we translate something. So having those opportunities where you're convening all of the different
Right.
elements of the value chain.
And when that's happening, what's been the most effective way to communicate Decode's values if these partners or investors, they don't have a scientific background, right? And you're trying to get them to understand all the great things that you're doing and all the amazing things that it can do.
Proof is in the pudding, and I would say that you can talk about what if all day long, but
Right.
it's the case studies,
Mm-hmm.
and it's actually showing them, here's where we started, here's where we stopped, and here's what we
Okay.
found along the way. I would say that is how you take this from concept to reality, and how you allow groups to see themselves in our solution. Because saying you've got a data platform is a fairly abstract thing, but when you say we've helped identify entirely new biomarkers to facilitate detection of autoimmune conditions, when we say we've identified biomarkers that can treat sepsis more effectively, when you say that you've got clinical decision support tools that can identify an MS patient before a relapse, those are use cases that allow it to be a little bit more concrete. So I think it's important to get it out of the conceptual world and to get it into, here is a domain or here's a problem we're going to solve, and then actually fill in the details.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Chase, since you straddle science and business, I'd love to hear where you see the smartest investment and collaboration opportunities right now.
I think that the smartest investments are in groups that are really bringing together all the different layers of the data cake that we were talking about,
Mm,
and then who are using it to accelerate not only the commercialization of existing ideas, but also influencing the discovery process itself. So end to end integration of advanced data methods, I would say, are companies that really pique my curiosity. And for us, one of the things that we're working on is actually trying to remove coding from our process. So I don't know if anyone has ever seen this, but the movie Iron Man. So Tony
mm,
Stark
yes.
has a computer, it's called Jarvis, and he interacts with it by voice. And he will ask certain questions, and the computer will then take certain actions and then produce a result. One of
Hmm.
one of the major initiatives that we're working on, and we're not alone with this, is being able to unleash the scientist or unleash the commercial leader
Mm,
into the world of their existing data, and
right.
to remove the constraints of hard coding the solutions. As a scientist in the late 2000s, I wasn't trained to code. Data science wasn't a class that you could take. I was completely dependent upon colleagues to translate my biologic question into a computational approach to be able to answer it. And it was often answered in a way that wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was close enough. And what I think we're witnessing today is the elimination of the tech barrier for biologists and clinicians and business leaders to ask the questions that keep them up at night.
Right.
And we're piloting a lot of this ourselves. So it's taking a lot of the questions that the R&D leaders at these big organizations are asking time and time again, and instead of doing it in the language of code, we're
Hmm.
asking it in plain English, and then embedding some of our example code repositories to then get to some of these questions much faster. And I've already done this in some of our projects. And in an afternoon, I can answer and get to the same result that 3 or 4 years ago might have taken us a week.
Wow, that must be a great feeling.
It makes you not want to sleep, because you're like, if I sleep, I'm not
Yeah.
moving forward.
Hmm. Oh my goodness, that's really funny. Chase, if you can invest in or collaborate with one category or company that really understands what you're working toward, one that's getting it right, what would that be and why?
I would say that I would invest in companies that are sitting at the nexus between AI, biology, and clinical delivery. And I
Okay.
think that there are a number of great examples in the U.S. If I could
Mhm.
point to one, it would
Sure.
likely be Flagship Pioneering. They are great investors. They also incubate their own companies. I have friends who are actually leading some of their portfolio companies that I think are making a tremendous difference. They're creating entirely new markets. But Flagship understands what it means to make a multi billion dollar impact on an industry. And I think that they have been very early to this intersection of the biologic question and use of technology to accelerate and improve the accuracy of the outcome. And one company in particular that they have recently invested in is really focused on the earliest elements of discovery all the way through commercialization and all of the data elements in between. And so I think it's that perspective to be able to take a 30,000 foot approach and see where the industry's headed that I respect about them as an organization. But I think more importantly is they are going to be giving tools to biologists and clinical teams and commercial teams to ask critical questions. And so I see a lot of what keeps us up at night reflected in
Right.
their investment thesis.
Now, are there industries outside of healthcare like tech, logistics, or insurance that you think could unlock genomics' full value?
One of the things that I think is really important is getting people like me outside of healthcare and exposing us to other domains.
Mhm.
And I found very early on in my career that by being in healthcare, I was looking at everything through the healthcare rose colored glasses. And it wasn't until I left the medical center and went to find collaborators in other aspects of the university that I was able to get the tool that I needed to solve my problem. So back to the origins of my machine learning AI experience. Had I not collaborated with other silos, I would have been completely shipwrecked. Because
Right.
if it couldn't have been done in Excel, we didn't want to talk about it. And so for me, I think it's important that healthcare and fintech, edtech, whatever it is, that we go and exchange approaches to solving problems because it's in those moments that you might see a glimmer of yourself and the problems that you're trying to solve in their approach to driving this forward. And you mentioned logistics.
Right.
You know, when you think about the commercialization aspect of innovation and think about all of the activity that's happening in Africa right now,
Mhm.
logistics and infrastructure are front and center. You can have the
Okay.
best medical innovation on the planet, but if you can't get it to the patient, then you're completely missing the point. Um, and so there's a perfect example where healthcare and logistics and problem solving collide to impact patients on the African continent, just as an example.
Now, in this conversation, you've mentioned the word collaboration, and I think that is so important. And I think that there's so many companies and people doing a lot of this type of work, and maybe there isn't enough collaboration. What are some of the downfalls when people aren't collaborating properly?
I think that, especially for early stage ventures, if you're not
Mhm.
collaborating with multidisciplinary stakeholders,
Right.
you'll create something that can't ever see the commercial light of day.
Oh, okay.
It's often simple approaches, explainable approaches. It's often something that's been beat up through multiple layers of feedback that will see the light of day. And I find time and time again, particularly in academia, that you can develop the Starship Enterprise, but if the market's only willing to buy a bicycle, you're either far too advanced or too early, or you've just not done enough time discovering what is truly needed in order to reach a patient life.
Chase, what do you think is the biggest thing investors or leaders should focus on in the 3 trillion genomics industry? And also, what's overhyped or overlooked?
I would say that thinking about genomics as a silver bullet is overhyped because genomics alone rarely explains disease complexity. Overlooked, I think it goes back to the integration of multi-omics and real-world data. It's at that nexus point between multi-omics and real-world data where real breakthroughs lie.
Hmm.
From an investor perspective, I would say that the winners will be those who build adaptable, privacy conscious infrastructure rather than one off algorithms that are
Right.
taking advantage of that integration. Um, if I'm thinking to the future, the next frontier isn't just what data we collect, but how we
Right.
connect and interpret it responsibly.
Okay. Wow, this has been fantastic. You've given us so much to think about, Chase. I want to end with what you'd want our audience to do differently after hearing this. So, what's the biggest thing you'd hope our audience takes away from this conversation? Maybe a shift in how they invest their time, their capital, or even how they think about where genomics is headed?
Yeah, I would say that my main message would be precision medicine is not a future concept. It's happening now, and collaboration is the multiplier. A call to action might be whether you're an investor, clinician, or researcher, ask how your work contributes to interoperability and shared insight. And the broader takeaway might be that genomics can only transform care if we align incentives around data sharing, ethics, and patient outcomes. Not just thinking about the next publication if you're an academic or profits if you're on the commercial end, but I think that we really need on the genomics side to think about this data sharing, the ethics involved, and then how we're tracking patient outcomes. And if we can get that system and connective tissue right, then I
Right.
think precision medicine is going to be poised to make a tremendous impact. And we're seeing, a dramatic uptick in precision medicine testing in the U.S. If you look at the UK, back to the Global Health Innovators experience that I just recently had,
Mhm.
it's the cornerstone of the 10-year plan for the NHS.
Oh,
So
wow.
policy leaders are thinking about it, and we all need to come together to be able to have these tools have a chance for success. And the data sharing and patient outcomes and how we think about compliance and governance and privacy is essential to that.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you one more little question. When do you think genomics will stop being its own industry and just be a part of medicine?
I think that certainly over the next, I would say, 5 to 10 years, and I know a lot of companies that are thinking very intently about how we capture our healthcare data, how we store our healthcare data. And I would say over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see on our iPhones, just as part of our traveling wallet, if you will, more and more health information at our fingertips. It's not going to be just stored in the EHR at the physician's office that we don't have access to. I think the data points that tell the story of our life, whether it's how much sleep you got at night, the food that you're eating, or your genetic makeup, I think that that information is going to be stored in our pockets. And I think that that's already starting to happen right now. And it's all going to come down to interpretation and what we do with that information and what our care teams do with that. And The LLM generative AI explosion allows us to interpret and bring together superpowers from all corners of the globe to be able to interpret that information once it's all assembled. And that's likely going to happen on your phone.
Chase, thank you so much for joining us on the Helix Exchange. It's been fascinating to hear how Decode Health is connecting data, genomics, and action. And we'll be watching your work closely. To our audience, stay connected with us on @Genomics Media across all your favorite platforms.